What up, y'all? This is Patrick Haize, and in this video I want to go over how I understand the thought process, how I understand thinking, and how I use this understanding of thinking to modulate my thoughts so I can create a perpetual feedback loop of positive thoughts. Because one of the major things that we all wrestle with is the tendency to think negative thoughts, or the tendency to just have thoughts and have a relationship to thinking that is unhealthy or counterproductive. So what I want to go through in this video is, how I see thinking, and then also how I use that understanding of thinking to modulate my thinking. So what actually inspired this video, it's obviously not improv, I'm coming in with a real theme, but what inspired it was I was going through this song that I've recently written, and there's this line in the song where I say, being lit up is knowing the whole procedure. Your body's an antenna and your mind is a receiver. Your heart's a transmitter. So tune into the feed of the luminous dream weavers, bringing music from the ethers. And what I'm talking about in this is this understanding or this mapping of the thought process and the physical body and the emotions as kind of seeing it as kind of like an antenna, right? So our physical body is an antenna, and we pull in thoughts and emotions and all sorts of different things from the ethers. Right? We're pulling stuff in from the non-physical realm. And understanding that our thoughts are not, in a sense, like created by our mind or created by our brain, but understanding rather that our thoughts are more like streams or songs coming in from radio stations that we're tuned to is hyper useful, because this is actually more of an accurate map for what's going on. And anyone that's really tuned into the thought process will corroborate that that the thoughts that we experience kind of just arrive. They show up, they stream into us. They're not things that we're actually like constructing from the ground up, but rather they're things that there's frequency bandwidths that we harmonize with. And whatever bandwidth that we're harmonizing with will send a stream of thoughts to us. And this is why when you're in a bad mood, you have negative thoughts, and when you're in a good mood, you have positive thoughts, because the vibration of your antenna is what's attracting the particular radio station of thoughts to come forward. Now, the more in alignment we become, the more that radio station, in my experience, comes from the very center or the core. And the more that the vibration of the thoughts that we're getting saturates our entire existence with like a big yes, like you feel it through your whole body. Your energy body's happy, your physiological body's happy, your mind, the thought that you're having is in correlation with that happiness, your mood is good, and it's coming through. And usually when thoughts come through in this very in alignment space, it feels like it comes really from the center. It's coming from our center. When thoughts come through in this format, they have a momentum to them, where it's like they're being expressed immediately in some form, or they're even an action step. They have so much juice to them that it moves you, and it moves you in a direction that is to express this in the world, right? So what I want to talk about is kind of the different modulating aspects, the cofactors for what modulates this antenna, and how this antenna then tunes to different radio stations of thought. So the first modulator is our physiological health, right? So if our body is unhealthy, if we're eating toxins, if we're in a toxic environment and the body has like a large toxic load to handle, then basically the circuits aren't working properly, right? So we're not getting the right neurotransmitters, the right hormone, the right brain chemistry balance, and all of these things have an effect on the radio signal. So you can just think about, like, if your little handheld radio didn't have the proper juice coming from the battery, or there's a problem with the mechanism of the battery distributing the right power to the rest of the unit, then your ability to stream the radio station is not going to be as good. So in our case, we would start streaming negative radio stations. Or if we were streaming higher radio stations, we couldn't get a clear signal to it, right? So it would be like static coming in. And this is why it's so important for us to tune our physical vessels, because our physical vessels are like the hardware to this antenna. And when we're well greased and we're well oiled and we're clean, then we have the hardware that has the capacity to reach those higher radio stations that ultimately fulfill the entire being, right? Also fulfill the planet. So first and foremost, the physical body is really important to have intact and in tune in order for us to have access to those higher stations. Because one thing I want to clarify too, these higher stations, what I'm talking about, these higher vibrational stations, these stations are God consciousness, right? So when we're tuning to a really high vibrational station, we're tuning essentially to the center of our true being. And then that true God that is within us transmits forward, and it transmits forward in a harmonious way that is in service to all of creation, including ourselves, right? So these higher radio stations that I'm talking about, and they keep going higher and higher and higher and higher. The higher the frequency of the radio station, the more in alignment with our true nature we are, and the more of a God transmission we're bringing through. So we start having God thoughts, God emotions, God actions. When we're acting, thinking, and emoting like a God, then we're embodying a God, and we have an effect like a God on this planet, right? So tuning into these higher frequencies is like tuning into the God within us. Okay, so the first aspect was our physiological state, right? The next one is our emotional body. And the emotional body is basically, it's like a field of energy that's been constructed over our life due to all of our past experiences, our belief systems, all the different thoughts and stuff. But ultimately, it's an energy field in our emotional body. And the reason I bring this up is because what can often be a cause of negative thinking is some sort of energetic trauma that's still stored within the energy body. Right? So if we had some sort of really intense experience when we were a child, and that traumatized us, and we've kind of disregarded that aspect of ourselves, or we're afraid of experiencing the traumatizing energy that we've kind of pushed away, then that traumatizing energy can stick in our energetic body, and then that can kind of it can modulate where what radio stations the antenna is able to tune into, right? So our energy body is really important. Another thing about this is the shadow aspects of ourself are also stored in our energy body. So if there's aspects of our consciousness that we've denied, so if we start to identify with an archetype and say like, this is me, but we still have emotions or desires or energies in our body that conflict with our identity, our ego identity of who we think we are, these emotions and desires sit in our energy body, in our desire body, and they influence our thinking. And the more removed we are from them, the more we have to kind of filter those energies and desires and emotions through a prism that we're comfortable with, which distorts the reality of where they're coming from. And so we see them in distorted ways. So like an example would be like projection, right? So if you, oftentimes you've heard of this, I'm sure you've heard of what projection means. So oftentimes what projection is where somebody has an attribute within themselves that they're not willing to integrate, they're not willing to look at, but they notice it in all these people around them. And oftentimes these people around them don't even have that attribute, but they project that attribute onto them because it's their only way of integrating or their only way of kind of synthesizing that energy pocket that's stuck in their energy field. So our energy field and cleansing our energy field is really important. Cleansing our emotions is really important for being able to fine-tune this antenna, right? Okay, so the next level is our mood. And our mood is obviously deeply correlated with our energy body because, if there's a bunch of distortions in our field, it's going to be like a governor on our mood. But nonetheless, whether we have distortions in our field or not, we still all have a range of emotional states or a range of mood that we can move through. And when we're in a really good mood, we naturally will have more positive thoughts. And when we're in a bad mood, we'll naturally have more negative thoughts, right? So this is another cofactor for what modulates or changes the dial to tune into different radio stations. Now the next one, which has a huge effect on mood also, and this one is potentially one of the most, well, it is one of the most powerful ones, definitely, is our belief structure, our belief system, our paradigm, right? Because our paradigm is ultimately, in many ways, it's like the capacity for radio stations. Like what we believe is possible and what we fundamentally believe, how we relate to our reality based off our belief structure, has a large effect on how we interpret the things around us and the things that come into our life, and it has a large effect on basically what kind of vibrations we'll allow ourselves to have. So if we have a belief system that says that we're not worthy or we're not good enough, then it's going to be really hard to experience something that is of the vibration of worthiness, right? So then that radio station is basically, it's not online. We can't tune to it because our belief structure is preventing us from that. Okay, so the other cofactor in what kind of thoughts we tune into and what we're streaming is just our focus or our attention, what we put our attention on. So obviously, if I'm looking at the camera and I say, okay, well, I'm going to start putting my attention on the camera. As I put my attention on the camera, I will start having thoughts about the camera. I'm focusing on the camera. So, and then the nature of the thoughts that come up is a mixture of where I'm focusing and then all of those other cofactors that I mentioned. So let's say, say my body is super healthy, so that is having no effect on my association with the camera. The next thing then would be, is if I'm focusing on the camera, say if I'm in a good mood. Well, if I'm in a really good mood and I'm focusing on the camera, then maybe I'll start having thoughts about, oh wow, cameras are so amazing. They give us the opportunity to show ourselves to different people in different ways. We can express so much more through video than we can through the spoken word, and we can, send this across the internet. And what a great gift that cameras are to the human race, right? Because I'm in a good mood. Or if I'm in a bad mood, I might start focusing on the camera and have ideas like, well, these cameras, there's way too many cameras in the world, and it's an invasion on privacy, and it's, there's a lot of negative things that are filmed with cameras, and I might go off about, all those things. Now, and they both might be true, but the mood that I'm in will modulate which kind of thoughts start streaming through. And the belief system works very much like the mood in that sense, where, if I have a lot of associated beliefs where I've kind of like fixed myself to certain ideas surrounding, what a camera means to me, that's going to affect the kind of thoughts that I have regarding that camera. So our belief system develops associations with different things. And the more associations that we have that are positive with our reality, then the more positive thoughts will come just through interfacing with our reality, and the conversely with if we have negative associations. So essentially how this works is that we move our focus through our reality, and as we move our focus through a reality, whatever we're focusing on will then start pulling in thoughts from a radio station associated with whatever we're focusing on. And then that will also be further modulated by our mood and our belief system and then our physiological health. And this is how thoughts basically stream to us. This is how we tune our antenna. So, one of the common mistakes that a lot of people make when trying to upgrade their thinking process or think more positively is that people will basically only go about modulating their thoughts on the thought realm or in the thought dimension. They don't take all the other cofactors of physiological health, mood, and belief system and energy body into the equation. So an example would be somebody will have a negative thought, like maybe, oh, I'm disempowered, or like I can't do things right, I'm not competent, right? And then that thought, they'll be in the vibration of that thought. So basically their antenna is tuned to the radio station of feeling unworthy. And then they're feeling that thought, and that thought doesn't feel good, and they're in that space. And then they try to fight that thought with another thought, but they don't consider the vibrational state of their antenna. They just try to battle it with another thought and battle it out on that thought realm, or battle it out on that radio station. And this is kind of like trying to... it's kind of like putting on like a death metal radio station with music, maybe you like death metal, but a death metal radio station where it's maybe really depressing, and hoping to have a positive song come on the radio station. It doesn't work that way. You have to tune to a different radio station to get a different song. Now, what does happen from time to time is we have experiences where we're having a negative thought, and then we bring a positive thought in, and that shifts the negative thought. But it's not, what we're actually doing here is in the same way that our energy bodies can contain negative vibrations, our energy bodies can also contain positive vibrations. So even though we might be in a negative vibrational station, sometimes we can have positive thoughts that shift it. But what's actually happening is we're tuning into two different radio stations at the same time, right? And so understanding it that way, we realize that it's more useful to focus on the vibration than it is to focus on the thought to get the vibration, right? Focusing on the thought to get a vibration from it is much less effective, because you can have the same, say, like surface thought, but you can experience it from several different vibrations. Meaning you can have a thought, well, you can tell yourself in your head, you could say, I feel worthy, right? But that doesn't mean you're feeling the vibration of worthiness, right? That means you're just having a thought that says, I feel worthy. So even though the thought might look the same in the thought realm, it doesn't have the same vibrational frequency. So when we're having negative thoughts and we're on a negative station, if we try to superimpose quote unquote positive thoughts, but of that same vibration, they end up being like hollow thought forms that they're like imposters. They're a thought form that says I am worthy, so it looks like the same thought of saying I am worthy, but it lacks all those other categories. It lacks the vibrational quality of worthiness, right? So as we work on our energy fields and we develop more positive integration of worthiness, then what will happen is like I was giving the example of before, when we go down a negative radio station and we have a negative thought, oftentimes we will have a true positive thought that comes in also. So we're getting two different radio stations, and then we can feel that positive thought, and then we can start focusing on that positive vibration that came with the true positive thought, and that can help us to shift the radio station and shift away from the other radio station. So ultimately, what I'm trying to explain here is that there's a lot of dimensions to the process of thinking. And understanding the thought process, being everything that I mentioned and all those cofactors, gives us the capacity to really start modulating our thinking and upgrading our thought process so that eventually we can cleanse our physical body, cleanse our emotional body. We can modulate our mood and keep our focus and our belief system, and build a belief system that helps us to keep our focus on the types of things that fuel us and fuel the world, that are good for us, that help us to express that God essence. We can start to become an antenna for that God essence and express that through the world with less and less static and less interruptions. And one of the keys for developing this that I've experienced, one of them been the keys for me, is understanding that we are like an antenna. And all of these different cofactors are like modulators on that antenna that help us to tune to different radio stations. So that's everything I wanted to share with you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Haize. Like, subscribe, put any comments in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys next time. One love. If you liked the video you just saw and you want to support me in bringing more content like that to you, donate to my Patreon page. There's a link pinned in the comments below, and when you donate to the page, you get access to all sorts of cool giveaways like exclusive content, free music downloads, monthly group chats with me, and more. Now, every single donation that comes in goes directly to improving the quality and the quantity of my content. So thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you on the flip side.